Welcome to The Explainer. Okay, let's dive right into what is honestly one of the most incredible underdog stories out there. Seriously, this narrative completely changes how we think about success, failure, and just sheer force of will. Today, we're unpacking the story of Jensen Huang, the CEO and founder of NVIDIA. We're going to trace a path that starts in the absolute most unlikely of places. Picture this, a young boy cleaning toilets in a juvenile reform school, dealing with daily bullying. Now fast forward, and that exact same boy grows up to lead what is arguably the single most critical tech company in the world today, a company whose hardware is literally the backbone of the entire modern AI revolution.
$4 trillion. By 2026, NVIDIA's valuation had crossed this astronomical, frankly incomprehensible threshold. I mean, that's a number with 12 zeros. They're powering the whole shebang. Google, OpenAI, Microsoft, you name it. But, when you look at a $4 trillion company, it's so easy to just assume it was this inevitable, straight line right to the top. Like it was just a story of instant genius and easy money. But to really understand NVIDIA, to get to the actual DNA of this tech giant, we've got to contrast that massive number with the stark, gritty reality of where its leader's journey actually kicked off.
So, Jensen was born in Taiwan to a middle-class family. But due to political instability in Thailand, where they'd moved for his dad's engineering job, his parents decided to send him and his brother to the US in 1973 just to be safe. But guys, there was a massive misunderstanding. His uncle accidentally enrolled him, not in some prestigious boarding school, but in a juvenile reform school in Kentucky. Imagine being 10 years old, barely speaking English, and being forced by school rules to scrub toilets while your brother is out working on a tobacco farm. And he was bullied constantly by older students just because he couldn't speak the language. This incredibly tough phase lasted over a year before he finally reunited with his parents in Oregon. Fast forward a bit, he goes to Oregon State University, meets his future wife Lori, and literally pays his tuition by washing dishes and bussing tables at a local Denny's. The guy wasn't born into tech royalty, not by a long shot. He grinded his way through jobs at AMD and LSI Logic until April 1993 when he, along with Chris Malachowski and Curtis Priam, founded NVIDIA. Their big vision? To turn regular computers into absolute graphics powerhouses.
Section 1. The brink of failure. Because, as you'll see, just 2 years after founding the company, the whole dream almost went up in smoke. It was 1995, and NVIDIA was gearing up to launch their very first graphics chip, the NV1. On paper, this thing was supposed to be a total powerhouse, a real game changer. But they made a massive bet. NVIDIA built the NV1 based on a curved design architecture. The problem? The rest of the industry was moving in a totally different direction. Game developers, along with major players like Microsoft and their DirectX software, were all standardizing around triangles, so NVIDIA essentially built this incredibly beautiful key for a lock that the entire industry had just swapped out. The result? Total market rejection. Game developers completely ignored it. Out of the 250,000 chips they manufactured, 29,000 were returned. Just an absolute disaster.
Which brings us to a rather terrifying number: 30. Following the catastrophic failure of that NV1 chip, NVIDIA was just hemorrhaging cash. They had exactly 30 days of funding left before complete and total bankruptcy. Literally 1 month before the $4 trillion dream died as just another failed startup. Jensen Huang's company was backed entirely into a corner with almost zero way out.
But then, out of nowhere, a miraculous, almost unbelievable lifeline appeared. And this is honestly one of those key turning points in business history that you just can't script. The gaming giant Sega was busy developing their Dreamcast console, and they desperately needed an advanced 3D graphics GPU. They gave the contract to NVIDIA. Now, here's the crazy part. Eventually, Sega realized NVIDIA's tech approach just wasn't going to work out for them, and they canceled the project. But Sega's leadership really believed in Jensen and did something highly unusual. They paid NVIDIA for the contract anyway. That unexpected chunk of change gave NVIDIA just a few crucial months of runway to survive, pivot, and try one last time.
Section 2. The gaming revolution. Having narrowly escaped a total shutdown, the company completely shifted its energy, learned from that curved design mistake, and finally embraced the industry standard. So in 1997, utilizing that Sega Lifeline money, NVIDIA launched the Riva 128. It was a tremendously powerful graphics chip, and wow, the market responded instantly. They sold 1 million units in just 4 months. NVIDIA was officially back in the game. But they didn't just want to play the game, right? They wanted to completely redefine it. In 1999, they released the GeForce 256.
Now, this wasn't just another chip. This is historically recognized as the world's very first GPU, or graphics processing unit. This single invention spread like wildfire and permanently changed the entire gaming industry, cementing NVIDIA as an absolute powerhouse in rendering digital worlds.
Section 3. The Masterstroke. Shifting to AI. Jensen Huang realized that while rendering video games was incredibly lucrative, his vision wasn't going to be limited to just gaming. He saw a much broader horizon. He realized that the immense processing power needed to render a complex 3D video game could actually be harnessed for something much, much bigger. Step 1 of this massive pivot happened in 2006 when NVIDIA launched CUDA. This was a revolutionary technology that essentially allowed their gaming GPUs to be used for general computing. Now, this was a huge gamble at the time, but it perfectly positioned them for Step 2. In 2012, researchers at the University of Toronto used NVIDIA GPUs to train the AlexNet AI model, and the results were just mind-blowing. It proved to the world that GPUs were the perfect, unparalleled hardware for artificial intelligence. Which brings us right to Step 3. When the whole AI explosion hit, companies like Google, OpenAI, and Microsoft suddenly needed massive computing power. And who was sitting there, having spent years perfecting the exact hardware they needed? You guessed it, NVIDIA. Section 4. The trillion-dollar roller coaster. Because, as it turns out, even when you build the very backbone of the AI revolution, the market is ruthless.
So in the 2023 to 2024 period, NVIDIA's valuation just exploded past $3 trillion. But then, a competitor named DeepSeek launched their R1 model, claiming they could train AI at a vastly lower cost. Well, the market completely panicked, assuming NVIDIA's expensive hardware might suddenly become obsolete. In a single day, NVIDIA's shares plummeted by roughly 17%. Guys, that is a wipeout of over $500 billion in valuation in a matter of hours. It literally goes down as one of the biggest single-day losses in U.S. stock market history.
But that panic, it was pretty short-lived. A swift recovery followed because the market quickly woke up to a fundamental reality. Regardless of new, more efficient software models, the underlying insatiable demand for massive computing power to train and run these AIs just wasn't going anywhere. Actually, scratch that. It was accelerating. Tech companies realized they still desperately needed NVIDIA's hardware. Within just a few months, NVIDIA had recovered all of those losses, surging forward to cross that incredible $4 trillion mark. The demand was simply inevitable.
Which brings us to the core takeaway of this entire explainer. From cleaning toilets in a reform school, to being 30 days away from bankruptcy, to losing $500 billion in an afternoon, every single obstacle Jensen Huang faced forced a pivot that built the foundation for the next leap forward. His story is absolute proof that today's struggle truly can be the foundation of tomorrow's success. So it begs a really fascinating question for all of us. What if the biggest challenge or failure you're facing right now is actually the exact crucible required to build your own future breakthrough? Think about that and keep innovating.